Today I'm sharing a personal story with you. I'm sharing with you what happened when my father passed away and how I communicated with him from the other side. I know many of you are very curious about this topic. You've had your own experiences and curiosity with connecting with loved ones who've passed on. So my hope is that by sharing my own personal story, you will learn and you will get some understanding of how this transition works and what your part in it is when your loved one has crossed over to the other side. Hi, I'm Melissa and I'm the founder of the Spirit Guided Life School and two core programs to help you develop your spiritual gifts. The Communicate with Angels course to help you to learn to communicate with your angels, and Authentic and Aligned, which is a deep dive into finding your deeper soul's calling and purpose for this lifetime. I share weekly videos here on YouTube. If you feel inspired by these spirituality topics, I welcome you to our community. Please hit that subscribe button, and I can't wait to share more with you. Today, I'm sharing a little bit different than what I normally do, my tips and tricks. I'm sharing a personal story with you. And this is something that I've shared in person, but never on this online format. My intention to share this personal story is that it may inspire you and it may help you to understand your own situations. So, back in 2006, I received a phone call one day out of the blue. It was my mother, and she said, "Your father died today." And he had passed away of a heart attack. I was in absolute shock. It was completely unexpected. And so because I live in the United States and my father lived in New Zealand, I then had to make a very long journey to the other side of the world for the funeral. So in the meantime, the next day, I remember I was sitting at the dinner table and I was facing the front door. And I felt like I heard somebody knocking on the door, although there was no one there. And I said to my husband at the time, I said, "Oh my goodness, I think Dad is here visiting." And he's a very spiritually aware person, so he said, "Well, invite him in." So as I said, "Dad, come in," there was actually an armchair that was sitting right by the front door. And I stared at this armchair and I could see purple and silver flashing lights moving. And then at one point, I saw the outline of his face. It was just for a brief moment, and then it disappeared, and it went back to just kind of looking like light. It was like looking at an aura, but it was brighter and stronger, and there was no body there, right? It was just energy. And then after about a minute of just staring at this energy, this purple and silver light, not really knowing what to do, I heard my father's voice in my mind. It was as clear as day, just like he sounded when he was alive. And he said, "I'm going to go visit Lois now." So Lois was his de facto partner. And the light then disappeared. So then the next day I made the very long 28-hour journey back to New Zealand. And the very first thing that I did when I got off the plane is I joined my sisters and the rest of my family to go visit my father's body before he was cremated. And I remember walking into this room and looking at the body and thinking, that does not look anything like my dad, right? And I stared at it for a while, and slowly after a while I could sort of start to make out that, okay, yeah, that is what he looked like. But there was such a difference in how he looked, because what had happened is that the soul, which is the life force, the energy, had separated from his body. And our soul, our energy, is what gives the body its vibrancy, its personality, expression. So without that life force present, the body, his face, looked so different. It was quite shocking, actually. But then in that moment, I found myself looking up to the right corner of the ceiling. And again, I could see energy moving. It wasn't purple like it had been a couple of days before in my own living room, but it was just a light, a presence. And I remember looking back and forth and seeing, wow, I am seeing the soul has separated from the body. In the Reassurance College material, we talk about that the soul is connected to the body by a silver cord. And when you pass on from this lifetime, that silver cord is snapped. And your body remains on planet Earth because it's made up of planet Earth things. But your soul returns home to the universe because that's actually our true home. So as I was standing in this room, I was witnessing the separation of the soul and the body. And I could see it with my own eyes. I'm a very visual person. Vision, clairvoyance is my strongest psychic gift. So I'm very grateful that I actually was able to see energy and see his soul during these experiences. So later on, after I'd had a conversation with my mother, now my parents were divorced, okay? So it wasn't like they were communicating often, but she was on a very spiritual journey and my father knew that. And so later she told me that after my father had passed on, within a few hours, my mother could feel him around her. And she was explaining to him that when you're not attached to a body anymore, you can just imagine and intend that you want to go somewhere, anywhere in the world, and be there in an instant. This is actually what we do when we go to sleep. We astral travel. So, but my father was not very spiritually aware. And so my mother was sharing this with him because when he first passed on, he was very anxious and confused, right? He didn't understand what was happening. And so my mother was one of those people that actually helped to heal him. So it was so interesting when she later told me that, because then, you know, within a few hours of her sharing that with him, he came and visited me in my house in the United States because she had told him this, that he could astral travel. So those first few days after my father had passed away and I was staying in my hometown and, you know, regrouping with my family, I could hear his voice very loud and present, and just as it had sounded when he was alive. He was talking to me often and I was talking back. I wish I could remember what we were saying, but I honestly don't. But I do remember how clear and distinct his voice was. It honestly felt like he was right there in the room with me. Then after we'd had the funeral, I saw him come and visit and witness. And then he was ready to move out. After about a week of regrouping and connecting with his loved ones and realizing what had happened, that he had passed on and it was time to move to the other side, he went with his guides. And then after that, I couldn't hear him strongly. I couldn't feel his presence. But I knew that that was a good thing. And I was very grateful actually for training that I'd had prior to that, which is called trance healing, where I had helped souls that had passed on be able to regroup themselves and move on. So when my father actually was one of those confused souls, I was able to do the same and to help him to understand and to heal and to regroup. And for those that weren't as spiritually aware, I asked him if there's anything that he would like me to communicate to those people, because they may not be able to hear him as directly as I could. So in the years since, because this was a long time ago now, in the years since, I have felt my father visit from time to time. I felt him around very strongly when I had my son. That was 10 years ago now, but when my son was a baby, you know, his granddad came and visited him. But it was, his presence was nothing like that strong voice that I could hear in those first couple of days after he'd passed on. And this is what the point that I really want to drive home to you all, so that you understand what's happening. You will not hear them as that strong voice. You will not really even feel them around very much at all. If a soul is fully regrouped, they may come and visit and connect from time to time because you still have an affinity with them. But now if I feel my dad come around, I recognize the energy and how it feels, but I don't hear his voice and I don't see him. I can just feel this presence, because when you've gone to the other side, you leave your intellect behind. You're not attached to that brain and that personality as you are on planet Earth. So there's a distinct difference that's happening. And if you are wanting to hear your loved one talk to you as clear as day, I'm going to suggest to you that that's not in their best interest or yours, because they don't belong around planet Earth anymore. They need to be free. They need to actually go home. You're the one that's away from home right now. They've gone home to the universe, God, source, the all, heaven, whatever you choose to call it is fine. There's no rules here. But if you resonate with this idea of life after death, then this is really, really important. So every now and again, but not often, I will feel his presence. I felt it also when my sister got married. But most of the time now, I just bless him and I was on his way because he's moved on. So I hope that was inspiring to you. I hope that gives you some understanding of what might be happening if you have had loved ones in your life who've passed on. And if you can't feel them closely and if you can't hear them talking to you anymore, I want you to know that that's a positive sign. That's a positive sign that they've healed and they're where they need to be. If a soul is still close to planet Earth, is still talking to you, is still holding that personality, they've actually moved into a state of confusion. And that is like a holding pattern. They're not able to let go. They're energetically still clinging to planet Earth because it's familiar and they're fearful and they don't know what's happening, or they're just confused, right? But if they have some self-understanding, they can connect with their lights, their angels, and move out to where they need to be. And I actually had a dream about my dad several years ago now, that he was sitting around a round table with his master souls from this lifetime, regrouping what he learned from that lifetime and preparing for the next one. So do you want to hold your loved ones back, or do you want them to be free? This is a great misunderstanding, and we're creating a lot of pressure around planet Earth with these souls that really need to be healed and be free and move on. So let me know in the comments below how this resonated with you. It was such a joy to share my story. I love my dad so much. I still miss him. I still cry about it sometimes. Grief happens. But I'm just so grateful for that experience that I had, because I saw that there's really no such thing as death. I felt it. I experienced it. And I know that he's free and he's healed now and probably preparing for another lifetime. Who knows? All right, so have a look at this video next. It's called What Happens to My Loved Ones When I Pass On. This will really help you if you're grieving and going through those kind of experiences and wanting to talk to your loved ones. It's going to help you to put all of that in perspective. So go ahead and watch that one next, and I'll see you on over there.